Hello. It's been a long time since I've published a video on this channel. I apologize for it. It's been a complicated year and I'm not a professional YouTuber. It very much shows. Anyway, for the time being, I seem to be back. Now, the reason behind this video is the following. I have been asked to do a series of online concerts. I live in England where live concerts are still a problem. I'm going to do 4 different concerts. They will all be broadcasted live actually on this channel, hopefully. Since this is going to happen, I thought I would go over some of the works I am going to play in this series and discuss not so much the works in themselves as I did with Metner, which by the way I will finish soon because I've also have been asked to play this. I want more to talk about specific points about the interpretation, sometimes not so much because I have reached a firm conclusion, but because I have questioned myself, and it can be useful sometimes to discuss points, and maybe some of you will have insights of things which have escaped me. I won't be systematic about it. I will pick up things that I think are worthy of attention. My first program, and since we are near the end of a Beethoven year, I couldn't completely escape it, is simply going to be the last 3 Beethoven Sonatas, opus 109, 10 and 11. And it is actually the very beginning, the first movement of the opus 109 I would like to discuss here. In my mind, it's of course not at all the most difficult to play of the last Beethoven sonatas, but to my mind the first movement is the most puzzling one, and the one where I feel the least convinced or sure or secure in what I want to do with it. And so I'd like to share some of my questions and puzzles with you here. So I'll play the very beginning and then I'll tell you what sort of nags me about it. So I can stop here and actually say a few things about this. I've been toing and froing about this beginning to know exactly which character give it. It's written vivace ma non troppo. The average speeds you can see in Czerny or Moschles or Hans van Bülow is around 116, which is probably that or perhaps a little slower. You can either make it rather peaceful in some ways, settled, and it can be very nice. And for a long time this is rather what I was leaning towards. My problem with that is these huge breaks which happen at this point, which, if the music is too peaceful, doesn't seem warranted. And it seems to me that to lean towards a more vivace side of things and make it unsettled, as if the music is not touching ground, and it's not very much touching ground because the basses are always off the beat. There is never a bass on the beat. It starts on the second beat. So in some sense, it seems that Beethoven has done everything to make the music almost levitate. And I think to keep it that sense of instability, and of forward motion until we actually crash into this, rather than this just arriving a little bit out of the blue. So something more like this. Seems to me perhaps a bit more convincing. Then we have this second section, which we would have to call the second theme. Structurally, it's a really odd movement in that the first theme is actually so incredibly short and again unsettled. There is nothing which says, here I am, I'm the first theme, and then we move on to something else. The first theme starts already in motion and crashes almost immediately onto the second. And the second theme is even more strange than the first. I think the important thing here is to give it the character of an improvisation. So not something which is too deliberate, but something that seems to be made up and very moody, very changeable. It is adagio. Again, it's interesting to see that if we take Czerny and Moschles, their sense of an adagio is not exactly what we imagine today. It still has some sense of motion to it. And I think that's what I'm aiming for. Not something which is completely again settled. Which we hear quite often played like this. Something more changeable. So as if I was just improvising the music. And this really feels like playing the Emperor Concerto, the cadence in the first movement. And then the long development section, which is strange because it's a development section which borrows, as far as I can see, nothing from the second subject. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it seems to be, it is certainly based entirely upon this rhythm characteristic of the third. And now I want to talk about what really puzzles me most in this movement, and something I have never really been able to successfully solve. I'll just play it, that long crescendo reaching to the recapitulation. And then we are back to actually the second subject already. Everything is extremely condensed in this sonata. What puzzles me more than anything is this moment where the crescendo, which is beginning, is kind of halfway through and suddenly break, and the pattern completely changes from something which is a long line to this oddity where we have a sforzando on each second beat, so every other note. until we reach here. And I'll be honest, I don't really know what to do with this sforzando. Not only sforzando, but sforzando piano. So every time we have this sforzando, he rewrites the piano. So that absolutely cuts the crescendo in its track. And it's a kind of a setback, really. So what was being built seems to be taken away. And the meaning of the sforzando is still a puzzle to me. And I've listened to a great many number of recordings. A lot of them simply ignore it or downplay it, and certainly don't do the piano. A few of them, perhaps people like Schnabel or Richter, really try to do it literally as it is, but it doesn't sound very convincing, and I'm not sure entirely what Beethoven wanted. The way I want to do it at the moment is almost like a phrasing by two. So as if it was really. And on top of that, and that's more difficult, we have to take into account a more wide range kind of phrasing. So new phrase, and another new phrase, and then a phrase. And that is a recapitulation. So is the equivalent of our beginning. And it's a strong feature of Beethoven's last sonata that he tries to blur the recapitulation from the development, so that the recapitulation borrows some elements of the development, and there is no clean, clear cut, so that if you listen, you don't really know. The recapitulation really is the continuation of the development. And that is quite characteristic. We find it in the next opus 110 as well. So really, yeah, that moment puzzles me. And so far, I want to do it as written because I think it's more honest. And also, the people who tend to ignore the text have a great problem, is that this crescendo is simply too long. And they arrive here, and they are pretty much forte already, and there are 2 more lines to go. And you just find yourself making noise because you can't play any louder, the texture simply doesn't allow it. And you arrive here, where again the texture is very thin because there is absolutely nothing in the middle, it's everything here and here. And you can't create an enormous body of sounds, even less on the piano than you could on the, well, even less on the forte piano than you could on the piano. On the forte piano, the tone is very thin here. So there is at least one good thing about this setting back, is that it allows a pause in the crescendo, which means that we are not going to crash out this way too loud. I'll just play it a last time as best as I can at the moment, and let's see how it sounds. So now I'm piano and I can start my piano. And I'm forte here. And again, I want to crash onto that recapitulation of the second subject. So not that, but really make it feel almost well, sudden and unprepared. Something that comes as a genuine surprise. Once we have done that, I feel the problems of the movements are largely solved. The recapitulation of the second subject is just as improvised and strange as the first time, but it doesn't present any new problems. And the coda, and there is quite a long coda actually in this movement, which I may just play. Which I want to take, although he writes tempo 1, I want to take it slightly less fast because I think it's almost a little bit, not melancholic, but something along those lines. And then we have a kind of choral, which I think should be very free in tempo and is wonderful. And then we have the coda within the coda. And I think not slowing down too much at the end is probably right. Again, this chord comes on the second beat, not on the first. So it's another of those indications that the music is not firmly anchored, if you want. And I think if you slow down, it puts too much weight on it. So and then we are wait to expect something, and indeed, sorry, that's my piano during lockdown. Indeed, the second movement comes right from the first one without a break. Beethoven indicated a pedal going from the end of the first movement to the second. So I might talk about the second movement because I think it's also interesting, but I will do that in a separate video because I don't want to overwhelm people with a 40 minutes video at all. I hope this will have been interesting to at least some of you. And if you have any comments or insight or questions, I would be glad to read them because again, I feel I have more questions than answers, and that's true for a certain number of things in those last three sonatas, which is a very good thing.